Hello, everyone, and welcome to my live stream. I am discussing Bill 10 today. And hello, everyone who is going to be watching this after the live stream has ended. I'm discussing Bill 10 today, and I'm hoping that I can break it down into a simplified way that people can understand. I've realized from conversations and just seeing commentary on Facebook that many people do not really understand what Bill 10 is. Some people have been told either to support it, and some people have been told to be against it. Not many people have taken the time to actually read what Bill 10 is and its contents. Just as we start and as we wait for people to come on, I'm just going to share my screen and we can view the contents. Oops. We can view the contents. Just as we're waiting, you can see more people are coming on. Yes. So here is the memorandum, the beginning of Bill 10. I'm going to avoid using complicated language because the point of this is essentially to make Bill 10 something that people can understand. So Bill 10 is what a bill is essentially is a proposed law. Before something can become an act of parliament or can become law, when proposed bills or proposed legislation is taken before parliament, they're referred to as bills. So Bill 10 came out of something called NDF, the National Dialogue process. And we're going to have people who are going to come on later who are going to talk about that entire process. So I'm not going to talk about that. But as you can see from this live stream, some of the things that Bill 10 seeks to do is to revise the preamble in order to reaffirm the Christian nation character of Zambia. Another thing it seeks to do is to revise the principles and the values of the Constitution. And then something else is to revise the electoral system for elections to the National Assembly, to revise the period for the dissolution of the National Assembly, to revise the period of hearing and determination of the presidential election petition. This one is a critical one because after the election petition that happened in our past election, when they had established the Constitutional Court, they had set a period of 14 days for the period in which presidential election petitions are to be heard. And we can all see what sort of mess that brought. And let me also just go back and explain some of these. So when we look at C, revising the electoral system for the elections to the National Assembly. Some of the things included here are delimitation, which means breaking down the constituency or existing constituencies into further smaller constituencies. And this is critical because before this, I think the last time we had before, I think as at 1991, we had 150 constituencies. And in 2016, we had another 6 added because of the district. So the argument for this is that we need more constituencies because obviously the population has grown and the dynamics have changed. And then let's continue down on our list. Revise the period for dissolution of the National Assembly. So this is also one of the critical points of contention because they're proposing that they change the word dissolve and replace it with the word prorogue. And I'm going to show my screen again. Let me just show you what the definition of the word prorogue is. And yeah, so let's just use a dictionary. So prorogue means to discontinue a session of a parliament or legislative assembly without dissolving it. So bear that in mind when we are having a conversation about prorogue versus dissolving our parliament. So let's just continue down our list. And yes, so again, we were at D, now we are at E. So yes, we spoke about E, revising the period of the hearing and determination of the presidential election. So now we're at F, revise the manner of the election of the mayor and council chairperson. And then there's arguments that this is going to reduce the authority of these particular individuals. And then we look at G, establish the office of the deputy minister. If you didn't know, we used to have deputy ministers in Zambia, and then these were scraped off as a way of reducing our size of cabinet. But this bill proposes to reintroduce our deputy ministers and then to revise the composition of the cabinet, to revise the provisions relating to the establishment of commissions. So there's a number of commissions that you're going to see later in the bill, and some of them are further down the list. And then there is revise the provisions relating to the payment of pension and benefits and retention on the payroll. Someone is going to discuss that later. Provide for the membership of members of parliament in councils. And then we have to establish the Drug Enforcement Commission as the Anti-Drugs Economic and Financial Crimes Agency, and to redefine its function as the National Security Service. This is also up for contention, and we're going to have someone discuss this later. And then they want to revise the functions of the public protector and then revise the functions of the Bank of Zambia. I don't know if any of you have heard chatter in the media about how this is argued to give the power of printing money to cabinet and take it away from Bank of Zambia. We'll have someone who's going to give specifics to that later. And then revise the functions of the Auditor General and provide for matters connected with or incidental to the foregoing. So after that, the bill now starts to further explain. So I think, again, to just go through the definitions for people that just might be catching up with us, Bill 10 is a proposed amendment to our constitution. When we had our constitution amendment process in 2016, not everything passed. So the argument for certain people that are arguing in favor of this bill is Bill 10 is going to rectify some of those elements of the constitution that did not pass. So where did this Bill 10 come from? Like I said earlier, Bill 10 came from the National Dialogue Forum, the NDF. Why should you care about Bill 10? Well, we should care about Bill 10 because it seeks to alter our constitution. It seeks to shift the balance of power, and it seeks to change systems. Changing systems could be a good, and it could be a bad thing as well. So let me just quickly go into what the pros of Bill 10 are from my perspective. So delimitation. Delimitation could be viewed as a pro and a con. So it has its advantages and it has its disadvantages. So the advantage here with delimitation is it could potentially weaken strongholds of certain parties, right? Whether it's the ruling party, whether it's an opposition party. So if essentially they cut the boundary on a place, they split a constituency which is already divided in its voting patterns in two. it could essentially mean that where the entire constituency, part of them wanted party A and part of them wanted party B, both of those parts of the constituency could have they could both have a candidate, they could both have their desired candidate in parliament. And then another progressive point about delimitation is there are certain constituencies which are too big, and even when they were created under dynamics that are not necessarily the same. So another positive element of Bill 10 is the mixed member representation. This is one of the elements I like about the bill, because it seeks to give people like the youth, the women, and the disabled who are already marginalized. And when you look at how this past week we've seen that they seek to increase the nomination fees of already disadvantaged people, what they're basically saying is leadership, or political leadership, is for a certain caliber of person, or a person who has a certain amount of money. And so mixed member representation is a way in which people could get into parliament outside of the traditional voting system. And then again, it seeks to correct some of the inconsistencies which were created which were created by our last 2016 constitution process. So I'll give you an example. Clause number 47 in bill number 10 is talking about removing the president of the constitutional court. Why this is important is it essentially, the way that the wording has been put makes it seem like the constitutional court is not a part of the judiciary. And where we have the chief justice, the head of the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, having a president of the constitutional court in the way that it was put sort of implies that the chief justice is not the head of the constitutional court as well. So that is one of the areas where Bill 10 is positive. Now let's go to the cons, which I'm sure many of you are waiting for. Delimitation, again, like I said, it has its pros, but it is also one of the elements that we should be very scared of, because if it's not correctly handled and if we do not put the correct guidelines, it could be a way in which power can be abused. Imagine giving parliament the power to just break big constituencies into little points where they could increase, one party could increase their authority and their numbers in parliament just by being able to create constituencies. So essentially, right now we have 156 elected MPs, and then we say we increase it to something like 500. And because of the way that it could play out, we could have one party with 400 MPs, and then we have another party with just maybe 50, and then we have 50 independent candidates. What this means is whenever any part of the constitution, they seek to change any part of the constitution, or anytime they choose to pass a law, the people that have the majority essentially control parliament, and there are no checks and balances. Another point that I personally do not like I mentioned, is where they seek to change the wording from dissolve to prorogue. Because what that means is, especially if there's going to be gaps in the way that they explain how this is going to be done, we could have members of parliament that just choose to prorogue and say, okay, we're not going to elections for a certain period of time for whatever reason that they choose to give us. And at the end of the day, we have no authority. So I hope this sort of waters down. I'm trying to be as simplistic as possible, because I realize that not many people understand the topic of Bill 10. So I'm just about to add Laura Miti on Laura Miti is an activist, and she's from an organization called Alliance for Community Action. And she's going to give you a little bit of a brief description of what she does there and what their work is. And then we're going to continue right into this discussion. Hello, good evening. How are you?
Very well, Tinashe. I'm well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
Can you hear me?
So if you could just give us yes, I can hear you now. If you could just give us a little bit of an introduction to who you are and what you do.
So I work for the Alliance for Community Action. It's an NGO, and we work primarily in public resource management monitoring, which means that we look at how public money is utilized and link it to the extent to which it improves citizen lives like it's supposed to. And we especially aim to help people, members of the general public, understand how public money works and how it is linked to their everyday lives, and the importance of holding government to account on the choices they make about money. So that's essentially our work.
Okay. So, to you, what are the most positive aspects of Bill 10?
I battle to find much that is positive about Bill 10, because overall, I think the problem with the Constitution is that if you're going to weigh it on the balance, if most of the proposals for amendment are negative, it's actually detrimental to talk about the positives on their own. Because what has happened, if you look at the way we've been discussing Bill 10, is that you have the people, especially those in support of government or government voices, have been picking and choosing one or two clauses and saying, this is good about Bill 10. But if you look at what is problematic about Bill 10, it's where it came from. It is that it is entirely underpinned by bad will. So, for example, I heard you say Bill 10, the fact that there'll be mixed member proportion, mixed member elections, and you have women and young people. The truth is that even in this current constitution, you could, except that maybe you didn't have affirmative action, but that was removed in 2016 by the sitting government. It was going to be there. It was removed. Okay, and also you've got to understand that this constitution employs the president to be inclusive when he's appointing people to cabinet. For example, there's not one disabled person in cabinet. So I think, but if you push it, for example, there's a question of the 30-day, the extension from 14 days to 30 days of the electoral petition. I find that particular clause, again, very difficult to see as positive. The truth is we do not want to reach petitions. We cannot be celebrating petitions. Petitions are divisive. Petitions can lead you to war. We should be talking about making sure that our elections are credible. But if you look at the rest of the Constitution, it makes it such that you will reach a petition because the elections become academic. The way the members of parliament, the numbers of members of parliament are supposed to be subscribed by a subsidiary law to the Constitution. So overall, the Constitution does not foresee a, should I say, stable election or a free and fair election. Therefore, you will reach this place which is negative. So I think we need to understand petitions as negative. Yes, you must put them there, just like we put burglar bars in our houses. That doesn't mean that we want the thieves to come. So we cannot celebrate beautiful burglar bars. You probably want to celebrate your lawn or something like that, your jacuzzi, but not your burglar bars. So the clause on the petition should be seen as a burglar bar. It's not something that you celebrate.
Okay. And to you, what are the most negative aspects of Bill 10?
I think again, like I've said, what's most negative about Bill 10, first of all, is just the fact that we should not be at all having the Bill 10. Nobody asked for the country to amend our constitution to this extent. So if you look at Bill 10, it seeks to amend our constitution to such an extent that our very system of democracy changes. You should not have that kind of amendment unless the people have asked for it. So what happened is after 2016, 2016 was probably the most celebrated constitutional amendment. It had issues, yes, it had loopholes, but largely it came out of a process that was underpinned by the people's will. Okay, so now, of course, we did have these issues, the whole 14 days. We had a constitution that seemed to envision proportional representation when the other clauses had been removed. So you had these loopholes and contradictions. That is what the people asked to do. We did not ask to completely change our system. So our biggest problem with Bill 10 is the question, why are we fundamentally amending our constitution and constitutional order when nobody asked for it? This seems to have come completely from the power base. Constitutions are not meant to be changed by those in power, but by the people. But then after that, you go into Bill 10 itself. Right now, it's very confusing talking about Bill 10 because which Bill 10 are you talking about? There is Bill 10 as presented last year. There is the gazetted amendments that are yet to be tabled by the Minister of Justice. Now, it depends what you're talking about. The original Bill 10 was crazy. I mean, like, the original 10 was almost an evil document, if you ask me. So much in it was wrong. It had the deputy ministers that people had refused. Okay, so the deputy ministers, Zambians rejected. It sought to create elections, a parliament that created itself. So it removed the numbers of members of parliament from parliament. It removes the power of parliament to oversee debt. It removed the upper limit for judges. There were all manner of issues within that bill. Predictably, there was a huge response from the public. And the government could not go on with it. Having insisted that it was doing very well and it was very welcome, the government could not go on with it. So the next thing we heard was that, no, we've accepted this, we've accepted that. Then we got this new gazetted bill, which is another very devious document, because this document was brought in on the basis that government had listened to the people's demands on their constitution and therefore was going to accept all the resolutions of the Parliamentary Select Committee that, to be fair, made very good recommendations. And so we end up with this new document. Again, all you have to do is read it in depth. Because it's almost as though government expects Zambians not to read. So they hide stuff. In this particular one, you then have the mixed member parliament. But while giving the mixed member parliament, a new word is inserted that says as prescribed. As prescribed means that Parliament itself will decide how many members of Parliament will be there, how many members of Parliament, and how the mixed member proportion will work. It can't work like that, because Parliament should be fully constituted by the Constitution. You cannot leave a constitutional body to decide how it will be. I'm going to give you an analogy. It's the equivalent of an organization needing to hire an executive director or an accountant, and then say at the interview, okay, tell us what will your salary be, what will your duties be, what would you be? Easy. So when you are hired, the job is there. You either take it or leave it. So that is one of the issues. This bill has also removed the ability of citizens to challenge the constitutionality of a candidate who has nominated for the presidency. that is something Zambians really want. It is important because you can find between nomination day and the election that someone is not a Zambian, does not qualify in one way or another. That has been removed. Again, the question is, why is the Minister of Justice removing and inserting clauses at this point? When what the public has been told is that all we are doing is inserting what came through the Parliamentary Select Committee. So again, the biggest problem with Bill 10 is the bad will. It seeks, it seems, to shore up the party in power. The problem, though, is that this constitution, if it were to pass, this constitutional bill, if it were to pass, would create a dictatorship. It creates a dictatorship out of anyone. Like I keep saying, Angel Gabriel will be a dictator if you gave him this constitution. It's not about who it is. It's not anti-PF. It's that, whether it's PF, whether it's UPAD, whether it's the Conservative Party in England, whether it's the Papa from church, anyone given this kind of powers would be a dictator. So what citizens need to do is stand away from the politics. Do not look at the constitution as punishing the sitting government or facilitating another party you want. Look at the constitution with a disinterested eye and say, this constitution, if someone was in power and they oversaw the country and they governed the country under it, would we be a democracy? Would our resources translate to the best lives for everyone? As it is, what I would say about Bill 10 is that it, in its current form, in fact, in any form it has come to, it creates a dictatorship, and it is one that takes us backwards. It takes us backwards from the gains we made in the 2016 amendment, which makes no sense, because we should be making constitutional progress rather than constitutional regression.
You bring up some very good points. So you said that essentially Bill 10 is not something that we should be supporting as citizens. And there's very few positive clauses that the bill creates. So if we look at it in like a general principle kind of thing. So for example, the mixed member representation seeks to create opportunities for more young people, for women. How else could we attain some of the principles that the bill is suggesting that it will create outside of passing Bill 10?
Well, we should probably have a constitutional amendment process, but not this one. You see, the issue here is not that we argue that we would like more women in parliament or more youth. That's not the issue, or even that maybe we need to delimitate our country. I think maybe probably semi-federate. There are a lot of issues that we need to deal with. The point is a constitutional review process must be instituted in consensus. It must be instituted in goodwill. The problem we have with Bill 10 is that it is a poison challenge. The reason it is being carried out is not for the country. So yes, we can go, and even like I said, our current constitution gives the president the power to appoint. In fact, it implores him to appoint people in such a way that is representative of the whole country, representative of the gender balance within the country, the current constitution. So it's not as though we do not have either the spirit in the law or even the letter of the law. If you look at subsidiary law, like the Gender Act, there's a lot in there. All right. So for 2 or 3 clauses, we cannot kill our larger democracy. Because what is the point of a mixed member parliament that has no power? You see, that is what is made by Bill 10. To have a mixed member parliament, but all the power has been moved to the executive. So it is very important for us as citizens to look at the larger picture and not be tricked at wearing blinkers and looking at this small positive, you know, a little bit of a flower that is floating on sewer.
I think those are very good points. And thank you very much for your time and for educating people. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
You too. That's for the rest of the show.
Thank you. So we had Laura Miti there who brought up some very good points about how she feels that the majority of the contents of Bill 10 are, even though there are some positive points, but because of the poison that bill might potentially pour into our governmental system, the positives that are reflected in the bill might not even be experienced or enjoyed. I have Mando Mashini about to join our live stream, and he's also going to give his thoughts and his views on Bill 10. Hello, Mando Mashini.
Hello, Tinashe, and good evening to everyone watching back there in Zambia.
How are you? Could you just give us a brief description of who you are, what you do?
Well, my name is Mando Mashini Chideshe, and I'm currently in the diaspora in Germany. I've been a youth activist, and I've worked with so many organizations in Zambia. I've done political programs, trainings, and whatnot in Zambia, but currently working for the United Nations Peace Corps and the Catholic Peace Corps also here in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so could you quickly just give us your thoughts on what do you think are the positive aspects of Bill 10?
First of all, I'm aware and concerned about the dwelling levels of violence among Zambians in general, as they continue watching and saying nothing on the increase of instances of human rights abuse, political violence, and high levels of corruption. Poor observance of the rule of law, and now a lot of manipulations of the masses over the Bill 10, which some people have taken it up to themselves to polarize it, if you know what I mean. I firmly believe that any legitimate process of making or the reviewing or amending a supreme law of the land ought to be promised on a process where there is worldly inclusiveness. It should also be transparency, like people, transparency ought to be there, accountability, people have to be accountable, and this is something that builds a country and should never be taken in a partisan interest. Unfortunately, we have observed. I personally, and most of us young people have observed that with regards to Bill 10, the process that was or is being undertaken lacks genuine concern or concern. It lacks genuine concerns on amongst us people, and it has become a source of division in the country. I believe when we are making a constitution, I think it should be a sense of unity. It should unite people. But if it is a sense of division, then we have to understand, say maybe there's something wrong there. Instead of bringing Zambians together for a common good, we have seen that it's bringing a lot of confusion.
So basically, what I gather from what you're saying is that there are no positive aspects of Bill 10.
I think it's not done in it's not done in the interest of the people.
Okay, so because of the intention and the procedure, therefore it sort of waters down whatever good that might be contained within the actual bill, right?
Exactly. Exactly, because that's exactly what I'm saying. Just like Laura Miti explained in the previous she was explaining before me. She said it correctly. She said, first and foremost, we are not supposed to be listed. You know what I mean? If we probably want to make something that will sustain or that a law of the land or the rule of the land, it has to take inclusive consultation, extensive consultations, because we do not want a situation where we create something to this year and next year we remove it. You know what I mean? We want it to benefit everyone and not only a particular section of the country, because the constitution at the end of the day should benefit everyone, because we are all part of the country. And if the previous constitution had loopholes in it, of course it has, we could have waited until such a particular time and given enough time frame for everyone in the country to participate. You understand? Because right now it's been rushed, and from what I believe in, everything that is rushed, it's not really good, because you want to rush it so that you achieve a certain agenda. Yeah, but then I want to put it in acknowledgement to say, in the first place, we are not supposed to have this debate on the Bill 10. We are not supposed to have it Bill 10, because the current constitution in its way, I think it is okay in as much as it has some amendments that need to be worked on, but I think not in this case. And that's why you see in the first instance, we're given a different document. In the now, we're given a gazetted document. So now we are wondering what truth is there, or what is the actual? Because I think it's unfortunate. Some people thought Zambians can't read, like Laura Miti said, and they put up all these things, and now we thank God for the corona in disguise. It's a blessing in disguise. I'm not saying it's a good thing. It's a blessing in disguise that people have enough time to be home and read and gone through, and now they realize to say, I think the supreme law of the land should have enough time to be looked at and to be, because I think it should be something that will sustain us for a very long time, not something that will just benefit a few.
So what essentially you're saying, in other words, is we should have like constitutional making process, and the procedure that has been followed should be better than the procedure that we have used. What elements of what the, like the positive, based on the positive elements or the seemingly positive elements of the bill, which of those would you want to see actually implemented, and what is your suggested way of implementing them outside of Bill 10?
For me, I have read through the bill, and you see, I don't think there's a clear good element that is there that I can point out and say this is good, this is bad, because the language in which it's being used is it's a debatable language. It's a so hello. Yeah, I can't hear you. Yeah, Malaiti.
Can you hear me? No.
No, that was just it.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So yeah, it is being put in such a way that it is being put in a language that only a few or only the elite can understand, and that's my major concern, because they try to sugarcoat certain things and make it seem as if it's good, but the language being used is something that you are able to manipulate and put it to your favor. You know what I mean? So in the current bill, I think they've sugarcoated things on the upper level, but the sour is beneath it. So what is my point is that they say one thing but actually mean another thing in the bill. So it is not really something that I want to even go through Parliament as of now, because I want it, the bill should be explained explicitly for everyone to understand. for everyone to, it shouldn't leave a margin of debate, and those are the problems that they're having in South Africa now. Those are the problems that they have in other countries, because their constitutions leave so much margins for debate, and now we need to interpret it, and you need so much lawyers, and you need so much what. But we just want a clean and straightforward thing that says if it is a coalition government, it's coalition government. If it's a thing, the everything that it's represented in the constitution. I think for me it is very important to make it very clear for even the underprivileged people to be able to understand, and it should also just the normal language and simple language that will make people to understand it, not what we are seeing, where they would say a very nice sentence, but in the midst put in some funny fancy word that actually destroys everything and makes it to their advantage. You understand? So that if they go to the courts and all that, they can win.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your interaction and your input, Mando.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. It's always nice to be here. Okay.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
Yeah. As I follow up also on these conversations, I think.
Thank you.
All right.
So I'm just about to add Anthony Bwalya. Anthony Bwalya is an activist, and he's going to give us a brief bio and description of what he does. Hello, Anthony. How are you?
I'm well, Tinashe. Thanks for having me. Apologies, the technology has been failing me, so I really apologize for that.
No worries.
Thank you.
Yes. So, could you just give us a brief introduction on yourself, what you do, and who you are?
What I do, right? So, I am currently a member of the UPND, and obviously we have our sights set on our home constituency in Kabushi for purposes of next year. But obviously before I joined politics, I used to work in professional services, and that was straight after my university days at CBU. So I think at the moment my preoccupation is I like to describe it as public service in the form of politics, constructive activism, focusing on things that that border on the welfare and well-being of the people and in our country. So anything that affects our country and our people, it is essentially my business. And that's my preoccupation at the moment.
Okay, so let's get right into the conversation about Bill 10. To you, what do you feel the positive aspects of Bill 10 are?
Yeah, look, I like to be very clear on this issue. I think the discussion around Bill 10, if you ask me, it is an unnecessary discussion at the moment, because look, where we're coming from, I think it's important that people appreciate the history of this discussion. Okay, people remember the acrimony that engulfed the political arena in the wake of the 2016 general election, and the petition that was subsequently launched to challenge the election of one Edgar Chagwa to the presidency, and the unanswered questions march around the 14 days. So the acrimony that ensued in the wake of that petition obviously necessitated a discussion around the need for the key political stakeholders.
Anthony?
With the assistance.
Hello, Anthony, you're breaking a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just could you pick up from the point where you were saying the election of His Excellency Edgar Chagwa?
Of course. So obviously in 2016, there was a petition that was launched in relation to the election of President Edgar Lungu. And obviously there were a lot of unanswered questions, many of them fundamentally around the interpretation of the 14-day period within which that petition should have been heard. And after so many unanswered questions around that issue, there was a lot of pulling and pushing back and forth amongst the key political stakeholders. And generally, there was this understanding that there needed to be a platform of reconciliation, which needed to be put together, where the key political stakeholders, with the assistance of key civil society players, and also the church, could come together and have these issues, ironed out, so that we could begin rebuilding the much needed but broken trust in our national politics, right? So that was the genesis of this discussion. And again, there was this understanding that part of that process of reconciliation amongst the key political stakeholders, there needed to be a discussion around perhaps beginning to rectify some of the key lacuna or inconsistencies in the Constitution, which may at the time may have led to misunderstandings around the interpretation of key clauses in the Constitution, and for the avoidance of any of such issues cropping up in the future. So the issues around the Constitution against that background was that if we needed to touch the Constitution, it was going to be for purposes of rectifying any inconsistencies or lacuna existing therein. Okay. Now, of course, now the country has seen what has happened. Obviously, after the putting together of the National Dialogue Forum, the conversation very quickly evolved beyond what the initial narrative was. So rather than the focus being and having been primarily on rectifying the inconsistencies or perceived lacuna in the Constitution, the conversation very quickly evolved into something of what many of us now describe as a monstrous process aimed at overturning not just the content, but also the character of our Republican Constitution. So that has been problematic in itself, because it is emblematic of so much broken trust and good faith from the onset. So now the question that the public is asking is, can we trust this group of politicians who from the onset built this whole process that has given birth to Bill 10 on a bed of lies, deception, and manipulation? And the answer, I think, has been a resounding chorus where everyone is saying, you know what, hold on, this is not what we signed up for. We are being told one story at the start, and now we are looking at a completely different story, which has now, generated a whole lot of unnecessary tension and toxicity, disagreements and acrimony, not just within the political arena, but also within the church and the civil society. And we think that this is not the direction that the country really should be going under and towards. And we think that we could have done a whole lot better by building, trust from the onset, building consensus, ensuring that the process was driven by the people themselves and not political actors. Because the point that we have been making is that, look, if you are going to look at the NDF as a people's assembly, right, where out of 400 seats, you had 40% of those places reserved for political actors, MPs, okay, who, whichever political party they were coming from, they had a partisan interest to serve and a personal interest to serve. So essentially, even before you talked about the mayors being invited, council chairpersons, and all other interested political players, you had 40% of what should have been a people's assembly overtaken by political power play. So that in itself was problematic, because now the NDF clearly was a political arena and not a people's assembly. And we know that the constitution should be a people's driven process and not one hijacked by political power brokers.
So, Anthony, to paraphrase everything you said, are you saying that there's nothing positive in your view about the Bill 10?
The credibility of the content in Bill 10 should have been protected and guaranteed by the process itself. So if the process itself has been placed into such serious question and jeopardy from the very start, even before it had taken off, then you know that there has been little or no trust at all, or faith which can be placed in and around the content of Bill 10. Look, we had an opportunity.
Because of the absence of the trust, like you say, and the correct procedure followed, it, in your view, derogates or disqualifies the contents of the bill.
It's a poisoned. It's a poisoned chalice. Let me put it that way.
Okay, so I understand. So now let's carry on the conversation to the negatives. So you implied that there's pretty much nothing positive, or the positives have already been poisoned or were poisoned before the bill was ever written because of the way that things were done. So what are the specific negative aspects that maybe scare you the most, or are the pick points of the poison?
So just to be very clear, what should have been the positives of Bill 10 should have been and ought to have been the focus on rectifying the inconsistencies that may already exist in the Constitution. We have bypassed and sidestepped that very crucial and fundamental pillar of what this conversation should have been about. That should have been the foremost and fundamental positive of Bill 10. Anything and
so
everything
since that doesn't exist, what are the negatives that people and the citizens should look out for?
So one thing that I think that people fundamentally should be aware of is that Bill 10 essentially is seeking to shift the balance of power. It's looking to shift the balance of power much towards a toxic and politically polarized legislative arm of government, which is Parliament. Now, people know very well that Parliament is responsible for enacting laws. When you have a Parliament that at the moment is being proposed to, we're looking to give Parliament the power to constitute itself. So essentially, Parliament will be birthed by Parliament and not by the Constitution, as is the case at the moment. That is problematic, because the moment we allow Parliament to constitute itself, then all constitutionalism or the checks and balances which originally should exist on the exercise of power on the part of Parliament is going to be eroded. And that in itself is going to become problematic. Look, one of the things that has been much talked about is the issue of mixed member representation, okay? Because now election to Parliament is being proposed to be on the basis of mixed member parliamentary representation, except that has not been defined, okay? So if the Constitution is not going to define how Parliament is going to be constituted, then it means that that crucial and very important function is going to be relegated to Parliament itself by a subsidiary piece of legislation. Now you can imagine, you have a polarized, highly toxic and partisan Parliament being given the power to decide how Parliament itself should look. Can you imagine what is going to happen? And this is where now you would technically find that Parliament, irrespective of which political party would have the majority at any given time in the history of this of Parliament, under the proposed rules, You'd have parliament now proposing to say, okay, because now we are in power, we are what? PF at the moment, we can go and subdivide a number of constituencies in our strongholds, knowing that we can secure a majority seats in parliament by doing that. That means that a parliament of that sort can literally wake up one day and say, okay, look, how do we disqualify the next guy? Okay, can we pass a law which disqualifies anybody who has run for election 3 times? We know what that would mean for certain candidates. A parliament like that can wake up and try to fix the enemies of the president, even within the party in power itself, by maybe just saying, look, let's pass a law which disqualifies anybody and everybody who has a pending case before the courts of law. That can easily be done. And at the moment, we know that we are looking to abolish service commissions. Part of that is the Judicial Service Commission, which is responsible for recommending judges to the High Court and the Supreme Court and the Constitutional Court to the President. What that would do is that it would give the President latitude literally to handpick judges, any number, unlimited number, to sit on those key judicial benches. That would be the death of democracy in Zambia, and nobody wants that. We fought very hard, Tinashe, in 1973. In 1979, I think, after KK reintroduced the technical one-party state in 1973. We don't want to go back to that.
So just to ask for a point of clarity, let's dial it a little bit. You were saying, which specific clause are you referring to when you were saying that it would give the president power, appoint as many judges as he wants rather than a prescribed number? Because, and are you talking about what type of judges? Supreme Court judges, High Court judges, or just judges across all our courts? Like, could you give more insight?
Okay, so for example, if we are going to repeal Part 18 of the Constitution, which is where all the service commissions sit, okay, then obviously that will erode the power for that will mean that these service commissions, which essentially provide critical checks on the exercise of executive power in the manner that judges are appointed either to the Supreme Court or to the High Court or Constitutional Court, then it means that the president then will be responsible for just handpicking judges. Okay, that is something you do not want. It's a recipe for disaster anywhere in the world. Yeah.
Okay, so Anthony, just in conclusion, why should people care about Bill 10?
Bill 10 is about our democracy. Okay, it is really about our democracy. We have fought so hard and we have come a long way to secure the kind of democracy that we have today. And we do not want to do anything foolish to be able to put that into jeopardy because it is politically expedient for a small group of people to have this go through at this particular moment in time in our history. We think that what we need to be doing, if we are going to be touching any part of the Constitution, we need to be going down the path of strengthening checks and balances, not just on the legislative arm of government in terms of parliament. And this is why we're saying the exercise of the approval in terms of public debt should be left to parliament, as opposed to what the proposal is at the moment, where it says debts to be ratified as prescribed. As prescribed by who? We want the Constitution as it is at the moment, where Parliament exercises oversight on the contraction of public debt. We also want to just strengthen oversight on the executive and how the executive exercises its authority, because that authority is not for the executive. It is held in trust for and on behalf of the Zambian people. So any such authority must be exercised for the benefit of the Zambian people. So those are the kind of reforms that we should be delivering, reforms that strengthen transparency and accountability for the benefit of the people, and in the manner that our public institutions work, particularly the three arms of government. Anything that takes away from that, it is a bad thing and it needs to be opposed. And I think for me, in my considered judgment, that is why people should care about Bill 10, and that is why Bill 10 should be withdrawn from the floor of the House, because it is not strengthening accountability and transparency in the manner that government works. It is going to take away from that. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anthony Bwalya, for joining us and for your time. Have a good evening.
Well, thank you very much. It's a cold evening, so I'm going back to my cup of tea.
Okay, enjoy that.
All right. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay, so I'm just going to add another participant to our conversation, and I hope that so far the conversation has been informative. So I'm going to add Mr. Mulunga Jones Shimbela, who is the executive director for an institution called Center for Young Leaders in Africa, which he's also a co-founder of, and he's also a sitting councillor. Mr. Shimbela, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Good evening.
Okay, could you just give us a brief introduction before we get into, I know I've introduced you a bit, but could you give me an introduction before we get into the conversation?
Thank you very much. Well, there's no difference really between the introduction that you gave and what I'm going to give. So my full names are Mulunga Jones Shimbela. I'm the executive director for Center for Young Leaders in Africa. And I'm also a sitting councillor in Mumbo and Kamilambo constituency. I'm also one of the founder members of the Center for Young Leaders in Africa.
All right. Okay, so to you, what are the most positive aspects of Bill 10?
Wow, where to start from? I think there's, after interrogating it, first of all, the positive of Bill 10 is that it was going to serve as a platform that we were going to use to be able to normalize whatever abnormalities or inefficiencies or gaps that we've noted in the 2016 general election arising from the 2016 constitution. So the fact that people were willing to be able to participate and were ready to come together is a positive out of it. But then, without taking everything out of it, in its current form and state, there's one positive aspect in there, which is basically the mixed member proportional representation. I think this is something that is positive, that probably is able to help young people to fill up the gap or be able to participate in the governance process.
Okay. And to you, what are the most worrisome and the most negative aspects of Bill 10?
Well, as an institution, first of all, I think we did go through a rigorous process just to review the act itself when it came out. Of course, having been invited to participate in the deliberations of the National Dialogue Forum, and also bearing in mind that SILA is an institution that represents a consortium of political young people in political parties. And also understanding that within that consortium, there's political parties that are supporting the process, and therefore, as a consequence of that, then we had to participate in the process itself. So, having said that, when we looked at the bill, the couple of contentious issues that we argued against when we appeared before the parliamentary committee. Notable among those were one, the desire by the framers of the bill to preclude Parliament from having a say in the contraction of national debt. Now, if you look at this particular element, basically we can't have a situation where only one part of government, which is the legislature through cabinet, being able to decide to contract debts on behalf of a nation like this, like ours, at the exclusion of members of Parliament who in turn represent people who are supposed to be beneficiaries of those loans. So we felt that was I think that was not in the spirit that the young people would appreciate, and we recommended that. I think that particular article maybe needs to be changed, in as much as we appreciate cabinet does the planning on behalf of the people, but I think the debt ultimately has to be tabled in Parliament so that we have national consensus. People understand, members of Parliament are able to debate it, then it can go back they can go back in turn to their communities and inform the general citizenry and get feedback. And then the other issue, of course, was the unilateral, the article that talks about the president being able to unilaterally declare a province or demarcate or divide a province without the consent of Parliament. Again, this is really more like making the giving back the powers to the president, who, as is at present, already has enough powers. And then the other issue was the proposal to get the president to sign the country to international treaties without subjecting those treaties to the National Assembly. Now, you see, if one day or another we wake up with a rogue president in this country with such kind of an article embedded in the constitution, you can have a president who signs you up to a mafia organization or a terrorist organization. Before you wake up, you find the country has already been hijacked or blacklisted from dealing with the rest of the world. So these and some other, I think, 9 articles that we were, or 17 articles that we were able to review. Some of them includes the abolishment of the Gender and Equity Committee, and also various other commissions. I mean, and the element of removing some functions from the Bank of Zambia and taking them to cabinet. We felt, I think those were not very, very good. They were not done in a good spirit.
So just quickly, in conclusion, do you think you are for or against Bill 10?
Well, as an organization, it's not really a situation of being
in your personal capacity. Do you think is this something that you should allow to pass, or is it something that should be allowed to pass in certain additions made or exclusions made, or is it something that should just be scraped off of the table and we should go back to the drawing board?
Well, it's not really something that I would say we should just allow it to pass, or then we should just withdraw it and then throw it. I believe we haven't reached enough consensus, bearing in mind that one of the largest bodies that represent people in this country, which is the church bodies, were not present in the process. Yes, we can argue to say there were other people that came in, other churches and all those things, but then ultimately, I think we're supposed to give ourselves a law that should be able to govern all of us. So if it was me, what I would probably propose is that, look, how bad or how difficult is it, for example, to withdraw the bill, then let the technocrats look at it, and remove those articles that are contentious, incorporate the other articles that people have suggested, then reintroduce the bill without really going so much about it. That's how I would love it to be done. I know we're losing time as a country, but I think it's important that we have this inclusiveness in the way we come up with a law that should be able to bind on all of us. Yeah, that would be
okay. So just
my
to paraphrase your words, you say that there are some good elements and there's some negative elements as well, but you also feel uncomfortable about the fact that the process was not inclusive enough of the majority of Zambians. So you'd like to have those views of the people that were excluded or not included enough applied to the bill, and then we can proceed.
Exactly, because if you look at what is, if you look at the current status now, you will be able to see that the country is literally polarized. Okay, if you go to parliament, the bill right now is being threatened with not being supported by a large section of the members of parliament, and that in itself has got the ability actually to just make the entire process collapse, which is really going to be a loss, not necessarily to the people that are against it, but even to the people that are for the bill. So, for example, all this time that we've taken to argue against or for the bill, if maybe the bill was withdrawn and then refined, then regazetted and then reintroduced. We've seen these things happen before in the past. Okay. Other than us just
I think you're breaking a little bit, Jones.
Yeah.
You're breaking. I think we seem to have lost Jones because of network. But I think he was on his conclusive words, and we're just about to add Daniel Sichilongo, who is going to give us his perspective. Oh, John seems to have joined us. Hello there. You just popped
yes, there was a technical problem. Please, you can take me off. Yeah.
Okay, no problem. Thank you very much for joining our conversation, Jones.
Thank you.
Okay. Hello there, Mr. Sichilongo. Could you just give us a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, and we could get right into the conversation?
Okay, most definitely. My name is Daniel Sichilongo, as has been well mentioned. I'm the Secretary General of the Green Party of Zambia. I'm a youth advocate and an SDG advocate activist. So, amongst other things, for purposes of this, is limited to those.
Okay, so could you tell me about your views concerning the positive aspects of Bill 10?
Well, I think there are a number of things that are quite positive in this bill, in that it is creates an entry point to transitional systems. And when I say transitional systems, I mean the way you design your electoral system quite defines what type of political institutions and economic institutions you will have. It's an entry in that currently we have a democratic deficit when it comes to age groups. We know that the youth only make up 2.7% in parliament, meaning the majority voice of the majority of Zambians who are eligible to vote are excluded, actually, which means democracy currently is at a deficit. So also looking at the last time we had a functional delimitation in the country, I think the 1991 Constitution has 150 constituencies. And the last time there was an inclusion was because of new districts that were created, the 6 in 2016. So to be quite honest, it means these 150 constituencies that have been growing by population have had other members of parliament not fully representing people because of numbers. And the whole essence of delimitation really is to have effective representation. So, and if you are following a democratic type of effective representation, it is important to have delimitation and for people to be adequately represented. So it really gives part of those things, and also presents some corrective measures to the situation that was created in 2016. You remember there was an issue of the electoral petition, and what was the 14 days and the like. I don't think it would be nice to have such recurring situations. And as elections are not a one-off thing, they are not. They are more of a cycle. So on the cycle of elections, we do realize that after polling day, there are so many things that have to happen. You evaluate what went on, what went wrong, and then you follow through with what legislation should change. So amongst the electoral cycle, this process was necessary and is necessary. And in doing so, the National Dialogue Forum in itself created a platform to sort of review these. And this is why you saw the constitution, the electoral process, public order, and political parties bill being the documents that were being discussed, based on primarily the Tiavonga Declaration of Political Parties and also other inputs of citizens of Zambia. So sort of that.
Okay, and in your view, what are the most negative and most dangerous aspects of Bill 10?
Well, definitely, we know the legislature is a separate wing of government. If you try to remove parliamentary oversight over important matters, accountability is already flawed. And so on the duties, on the debt, it is necessary that Parliament actually reinforces its power of accountability. Also to try and ensure that the separation is more clear. This is very dangerous to a democracy. If you do not have a separation of power, necessarily you won't know how to handle your democracy on an accountability level. And also we do realize that the constitution is the grand norm. So the way it is designed defines how you are going to rule and govern. So it means if you put in things in the constitution that allow others to sort of oppress others, it means it becomes law. It will become law to oppress certain citizens. So the whole essence to create more justifiable constitution that will be able to appropriate equity and justice.
Okay, so based on your views, both the pros and the cons, what do you think the way forward regarding Bill 10 should be?
Well, I believe in parliamentary procedure because it is something that has been laid forth. And Parliament being the one body that creates law, should be given that opportunity to do what it does. It is self-regulatory, by the way. And for me, the whole essence of the procedures and the stages of a bill are necessarily to sort out such issues. If you have issues concerning the bill, if the bill does not make sense in certain points, it is important to follow the procedure. And if you do remember quite well, there is a committee stage which tries to address these issues. And I remember this committee stage was actually extended to ensure that extensive voices are added to the bill. Now, it's a risk, yes, to other people, because there is an issue of trust here when it comes to appropriation and creation of laws. But I should draw you back to the 2014 constitutional draft, which was the final draft according to people's submission from the ground, district level, provincial level, and national level. Okay, but we still saw the same document coming to Parliament where parliamentarians were cherry picking. Why? Because they have the constitutionally. Meaning, if we started another constitutional process, it will still go through the same for so long as the law has not changed. The only part that was subjected to a referendum is part 3, which is the Bill of Rights, of which it failed because of majority of people didn't vote. So it had the majority, except it didn't reach the threshold of that was necessary to pass this Bill of Rights. So we have a lot of things that are already hanging in the balance and a lot of power that has been appropriated but is not being used. So how do you then change these laws without the members of parliament? It's impossible. So it's an issue of, there'll always be a number of trade-offs when it comes to letting go of such power, because primarily Zambia is a participatory democracy. So members of parliament have the power based on the people who voted for them. Except in the constitution, it does not give space to actually hold them physically accountable, because you can't impeach a member of parliament. There is no such provision. Meaning the way they will represent you will still represent the fact that they are representing a constituency and they are doing their duty. So we need to be critical about which opportunities we are missing and which opportunities we have to broker power. Because the issue of constitutional matters must be handled constitutionally. Otherwise, if you are a person who purports to believe in constitutionalism and the sovereignty of a country, and you decide to do things illegally, it means you are no worse than a rebel leader. So for so long as we believe in the laws and the constitution, even the ways of changing it will be based on how the powers and laws are appropriated. And at present, I can only say hand on my heart, I do not think we elect parliament based on their capability. It's more based on the kind of system that we have, which is more tokenistic. It's either we are voting for a party or because a certain individual as an independent is popular, or maybe they were able to provide certain tokens that people can point to. But does that amount to a good lawmaker? Maybe, maybe not. But currently, no.
So based on this point, picking up from your point about our system being tokenistic, are there any recommendations you can make of alternatives we might want to consider when it comes to the type of system we have in regards to our legislature or our parliament, in other words?
Well, I would love to give an example of what's going on in South Africa today, where they have a full proportional representation system, and it is a parliamentary system where the presidency is actually appointed within parliament, meaning parliament as a body with different stakeholders holds the president directly accountable. And if anything around the presidency is fishy, parliament itself is able to handle and correct those measures, as we saw with the situation involving the former president, Jacob Zuma. So what we are saying is, the way you disproportionalize strong men, the way you disempower strong men is by empowering institutions. And parliament as an institution overseeing such a sovereign as Zambia would give correct amounts of power to different bodies. So if you look at also the judiciary of Africa, it's quite strong because of the way the constitution is. And this was a sacrifice that was made by one Nelson Mandela. His primary role after leaving prison when he became president was to change the constitution in such a manner that it would appropriate power, an electoral system that would empower the majority, empower institutions, whether he was there or not. Because primarily in the time of apartheid, it was a first past the post system, and it was favoring the apartheid regime, who even had access to resources. But this current system is more such that even a party that is well organized, it doesn't matter whether it is the ANC or not, can also appropriate and speak. As we have seen, the third largest party in South African parliament, EFF, has been doing quite well, because the way the system has been built, it's a full accountability. And we can see different stakeholders putting their voices there. And at the end of the day, the democracy is balanced. So we see less of a democracy in such a parliament.
So conclusively, Daniel, why should young people and Zambian citizens care about Bill 10, firstly? And then secondly, what options do we have so we're at our second reading of the bill, that's the stage we're at. What options do Zambian citizens have, and what options do the youth have?
Okay, it's important that every well-meaning Zambian has interest in the bill, because however it is going to affect you directly and indirectly, because it's an issue of institutionality. There are so many things that border on how the country will be run. So primarily you should be, and the options really, as a parliamentary procedure is, it cannot be reviewed. The bill cannot be reviewed without that 2/3 majority vote, and it can't be changed. Though I'm aware that the bill was gazetted again, I'm not really sure if the contents are the same, because I haven't yet got a physical copy.
They were actually changed.
Yes. So in short, it shows what the intention is, but in as much as the legality is questionable, because you haven't really changed the bill yet, you haven't voted yet, so you can't open the bill to change it. It does say that is a scheduled amendment. That is probably what cabinet intended to do, to amend it, and probably to a few stakeholders, the voices of the stakeholders as they were put. But like I put it in the beginning, there is an issue of trust and there is an issue of risk. But in a democracy, risk is primary. You take risks even to fight for your interests. You take risks to change. It is not a no-risk game. You either stay back and status, or you can ostrich and put your head in the sand, or you can actually come to the table and that you participate in governance to ensure that processes and procedures go as we have planned them. But it is a status of trade-offs, so we must understand that certain things will not 100% go our way. If they did, I would probably have the 2014 draft as it was as our current constitution. But do we? Not at all. So the power should be in interest of how this country is governed, which starts from your representative as your area member of parliament. How are they utilizing the power that they have given? Are they there to make laws to be true or not? These are the types of questions that ensure that we have a democracy that represents the sustainability that Zambia should have. The Zambia that we want will only be there if we participate, especially for young people making the demographic dividend. Power to the people.
Power to the people. But based on your point of participation, how do young people practically participate in this process, especially that we're at the second stage, the second reading stage of the bill?
Well, at this stage, advocacy is the most potent thing, because at the end of the day, it's the members of parliament who are making the decision. And whether they'll make the decision in favor or not would be based on trying to broker that power towards why you would want them to vote a certain way. But as I have mentioned, the right word is broker, because we do not know really whether they will go for the voices that they will hear, or they will stay on the position that they initially have. So the power still solely lies in the members of parliament, who are the representatives of the people. And this is why it is very tricky to say, you can then go forth to say, our position was not represented. By the fact that you participated in an election and you voted for a member of parliament, your representative in a party system is your member of parliament, and they are your voice.
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, Daniel, and your participation. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much. Power to the people.
Power to the people. So I'm about to add Gerald Chiluba, who is an advocate for Bill 10. We're just going to have him on quickly, because we should have ended a while ago, but we've overshot in time. Hello, Gerald. How are you? Can you hear us? I can see that your mic is muted. Could you unmute your mic? Gerald, can you hear me? Your mic is muted. Could you unmute your mic? Gerald. Unmute your mic, please. Can you hear me? Okay. Good evening, Mr. Chiluba.
Good to go. I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. How are you doing?
Hello?
Okay. So could you give us a brief introduction of who you are? Can you hear me?
Yes. Good evening, Tinashe. How are you?
Give us a brief introduction on who. I'm fine, thank you. A brief introduction of who you are and what you do, and we can get right into this conversation.
Okay. Thank you so much for this invite, Tinashe. My name is Gerald Chiluba, and I am a Bulletin advocate. I started following the issue to do with the constitutional amendment of Bill number 10 from its inception. And I must make mention that I participated in all the processes that led, to Bill 10. Hello?
So, in your view, I know that you are an advocate of this bill. So before I let you speak for the bill, what, in your view, are the negatives of this bill?
When you say negatives, I don't know from which angle you are trying to look at the bill. Maybe without not laboring so much in terms of giving you the background of Bill 10, I must make mention that the contents, all the articles that have been proposed in Bill 10 were proposals that came from the National Dialogue Forum. And the National Dialogue Forum had different stakeholders that participated as delegates. So we had the state, we had the young people, we had traditional leaders, we had the students, groups, all sorts of, stakeholders. And it is these stakeholders that were making the submissions. And it is those submissions that you and me are calling defend. You get the point. And so when you talk of the negatives of Bill 10, like I said, I don't know from which angle. Like, for example, in a Bill 10, you find that there are issues to do with chiefs. The chiefs themselves made a proposition to the NDF to say this is what they want to see. So whether that proposition is good or bad, I'm not in that position, to tell, because I'm not a chief. And there are other political. Yes,
all right.
Political.
So if I could give you context, I would like to give you context on the premise in which I'm coming from on negatives. So, for example, one of the key arguments against Bill 10 has been regarding inclusivity. So you have rightfully said that the aspects of the bill came out of the NDF process and the people that attended it. But there's questions and there's dissatisfaction regarding the inclusivity of the NDF process. So like we've had someone in this discussion mention how the major church mother bodies were excluded, in addition to even some of the sects that you say were represented, like the students and the chiefs and whatever. Even that process within itself was not inclusive. And then I would like to also draw your attention to another fact. So the government has recently gazetted Bill 10, and the contents of the recently gazetted Bill 10 are different from the contents that were in the NDF. So what are your thoughts regarding that? The contents that came out of the NDF process. So what are your thoughts?
First and foremost, I would like to address the the issue which you've raised. You are saying that there are other church organizations that were excluded from the process. I must make mention at Tinashe that there is no superior Zambian. You are not more Zambian than me. And you do not have superior religious organization. There is no religious grouping which is more superior than the other. So if an invite is extended to you and you decide to shun, the nation cannot be held at ransom just because Tinashe has refused to attend a meeting. That is not how things move. Things must go on with or without Tinashe. So the fact that there is a religious grouping which did not participate at the NDF, it cannot mean that the NDF was a fraud or it was not, a gathering which we can say did not have the legal backing. So people did not participate. There are other religious groupings that participated, unless you are telling me that there are other religious groupings who are more superior than the other. So I think we cannot really discuss that dynamic.
Okay, so like you said, we can't discuss the dynamic, but I think I would like to draw your attention to the fact that as you know, there was so much drama leading up to the NDF, and because of time, I think it would be important to after this process, I think it would be important for us to unpack the NDF and what happened before that process. But for example, the Catholic Church and the main mother bodies invited the government to a dialogue process. In addition to the opposition, we seem to have lost Gerald Chiluba. I'm hoping he comes back on, but we're just about to conclude. I hope this. Thank you for everyone that has been with us, for everyone, and it would have really been great to hear from Gerald. And I see him trying to connect. I think his voice is critical because he's an advocate of Bill 10. Yes, Gerald, thank you for coming back. So we're just talking about the NDF process and how there was drama surrounding that. And I think at the end of the day, the argument that there was inclusivity can't rely only on the fact of the people that were invited and chose not to come. We also need to think about the people that were not invited. But moving on from that, in the interest of time, what to you are the pros of this bill? What are the advantages? And how will this be in Zambia's benefit to enact Bill 10 and also, could I just in the interest of time, married to this question, do you think Bill 10 in its present form, the way it was tabled before Parliament and also the way that it has been gazetted recently, is something that is going to serve the Zambian people positively?
Okay. Maybe let me just give you a brief background so that we can help other people to understand one or two things. You remember in 2016, just after the elections, immediately when Parliament resumed, members of Parliament in their maiden speeches, they were raising the fact that there was need for the Constitution to be amended in Parliament. And what happened thereafter, fast forward, was that there was a private members' motion that was raised in Parliament by the honorable member for Mwasabombwe. he moved a motion to say that the constitution should be amended. And the issue was brought before the House, and it was debated upon. The MPs even voted on the issue. 92 members of parliament voted to say, indeed, the constitution should be, there was need for the constitution to be amended. 52 of parliament were against. But the motion was passed. The Minister of Justice in 2017 was given a go-ahead to begin to correct submissions from all stakeholders so that the constitution could be amended. The Minister of Justice, through its staff, was sent across all the districts and provinces to correct submissions for 1 year so that the constitution could be amended. After that 1 year, the political parties themselves, they approached the Republican president to say, look, even us as the political parties would like to make some submission to this ongoing process. We are asking through you, the president, maybe if you can hold, you get a point, right? The process that the Minister of Justice has begun already, so that we can also make some input. What happened? The president instructed the Minister of Justice to hold, so that the process could be inclusive. That was the whole idea. After that, through that CID, NDSS was held at Munungushi International Conference Center, where various stakeholders were brought together to discuss what form of constitutional reforms they wanted to see in the constitution.
Okay. So, just in the interest of time, I want to ask you something, because we seem to be confusing two things in this conversation. There's two aspects. We're talking about constitutional review process, and we're talking about the National Dialogue Forum. The National Dialogue Forum was not purported to be a national review, constitutional review process. It was initially purported to be a dialogue process.
But maybe if you can allow me to learn, you're going to appreciate where the NDF came from, because this is...
in the interest of time, if you could summarize and get to your point.
So we cannot just discuss the issue as it is. We need to discuss the process so that you can appreciate where the NDF came from. I cannot begin to debate if you don't understand the process, because it is...
No, we're allowing you to explain the process, but we're just asking, in the interest of time, if you could summarize so that we could get the point.
Okay, let me just move fast. So during the NDSS, it gave birth to the Siavonga meeting. In Siavonga meeting, where all secretary generals of political parties met to discuss the issues that they wanted to see further. It is from that meeting which gave now a legal framework. You get a point, right? It is the Siavonga resolution, which after the Siavonga resolutions were presented in Parliament, there was a point of order which was raised by Honorable Jack Mwingu. He was trying to ask the minister to give a legal framework to the issue of constitutional amendment. And the Minister of Justice went ahead to give a framework. The framework is what was known as the National Dialogue Forum. So now, what was the criteria of inviting the delegates at the National Dialogue? Remember, I had said that the Minister of Justice had already started the process of correcting submissions from individuals and organizations. So all those stakeholders that made submissions to the Ministry of Justice are the people who were invited at the National Dialogue Forum. Those are the people who constituted the NDF. You understand? So it is at this NDF that there were 79 articles that were proposed by the National Forum to say, this is the draft bill. This is what we need to see change in our constitution. But of course, by law, like most of my colleagues have earlier alluded to, it is Parliament which has the responsibility to make laws. So that bill draft was taken to Parliament, and the Speaker, instituted a committee to refine that document, to refine it further. And that's how come stakeholders appeared before the select committee. There were 29 meetings that were held to try and refine bill number 10. And the select committee made proposals to say, look, from our observation, what we have seen is that in bill 10, there are other articles that people have said no to. And in bill 10, there are other articles that people have said yes to. That was the submission from the select committee. Now, after that submission, government, through cabinet, also made a decision. Phone off. Hello?
Hello, I'm still here. Mr. Chiluba seems to be having problems with his internet connection. Gerald, are you still there? Gerald, are you still there? We seem his screen is frozen. We seem to have lost him. I'm very curious to hear where his point would have landed. Gerald, are you still there? All right, so this live stream has already shot on for longer than it was intended to. And it would have been very nice to hear a voice in support of Bill 10, talking about why, as young people or as Zambians, we need to enact this bill. I think it's important to entertain different perspectives before we actually come to a certain conclusion. So I'm hoping that in later live streams, maybe we could have a one-on-one interaction and discussion with Mr. Chiluba, giving us his perspective on Bill 10 and why he supports it and why he thinks the majority of Zambians should. I hope this has overall been informative and this has made Bill 10 less of a mystery, because conversations I've had with people really indicated the fact that they were finding Bill 10 very confusing, very mystical. It seemed to contain things that they didn't understand. And I hope that the people that I brought on today who gave different perspectives and different areas of interest and expertise on the bill were very helpful to helping shape your opinion and helping to inform you. Thank you very much for your participation and for watching this live stream. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. Have a good night.